Welcome into episode number 168 of The Voice Behind the Voice. I'm Sean Aronson, the TV and radio broadcaster for the St. Paul Saints, an independent minor league baseball team in the Twin Cities. Well, as I come to you on this Monday, 3 weeks left in the regular season, and hear how things shake out right now. Your St. Paul Saints sit 3 games in back of first place, but it is the top 2 teams that make the playoffs, and the Saints are currently 1 game up on that playoff spot over the Winnipeg Goldeyes, and they begin a 3-game series at home today against those Goldeyes. However, there is a 4th team in the mix with Chicago, the Chicago Dogs, sitting a game and a half behind the St. Paul Saints. It is going to be a very, very fascinating, entertaining, and hopefully fruitful 3 weeks for the St. Paul Saints. So that is your update right now. There was one thing that I wanted to talk about before I get you to this special episode. It is not a play-by-play broadcaster this week, but we'll get to that in a second. I started this podcast over 3 years ago now, and you guys have heard me tell the story. And as a matter of fact, I did an interview with the person whose idea it was for me to start a podcast. His name is Jamie Flam. He's been a good friend of mine ever since I've been in high school. He now runs a comedy and entertainment place in California. But he had been doing a podcast with a couple of other comedians for 9.5 years. Last week, they recorded their final episode after 9.5 years together. And look, as you get older, as you move on with life and things happen, it becomes a lot harder as a group to record episodes. And I think that is what happened with them. They never alluded to it. The podcast is called the Lo Shopo, Long Shot Podcast. And I just wanted to give it a little bit of recognition because it was because of my friend Jamie that this podcast got started. He was always pushing me to start it. And it got me thinking, look, 9.5 years, that is a long time. Now, they had guests, they had comedians and big-name comedians on their show over the course of 9.5 years, but not all the time, and not even, every month. But when they could get comedians to come on, they would sit down and just make him a part of this little chat. So I just wanted to give a little tip of the cap to the Long Shot Podcast. If you have never listened to it, again, I've had Jamie on this podcast before, and I've brought up that podcast. But feel free, you can go back. Basically, all it is 4 comedians or 4 people in the entertainment industry that just sitting around chatting about a bunch of different things. It's like being a fly on the wall of a conversation, and so I just wanted to give a shout out to them. With that, let's get to episode number 168, and it is Yeardley Smith who is the voice of Lisa Simpson. Now, for those of you that have tuned in and have already heard Yeardley Smith, that original episode that we ran, which was last year, was her in the broadcast booth with me. So it's within the context of a baseball game. I think the entire interview lasts about 20-25 minutes. This is a full-fledged sit-down with Yeardley Smith. This is an hour and 40 minutes of raw, emotional chat with Yeardley. She talks about everything. Her battle with body dysmorphia, with bulimia. She talks about her father being an alcoholic. There is a lot of amazing stuff. It is extremely, extremely raw. For those of you that are tuning in for Simpsons talk, we open the podcast with Simpsons talk. We end it with Simpsons talk. Everything in between is about Yeardley and how she got to where she is. I didn't change the format of this just because it was someone different. I've gotten the opportunity to know Yeardley over the last year. Her boyfriend is our first base coach. If you remember me talking about last year, their production company, Yeardley's production company, followed the Saints around for a full month before the season started and the first homestand of the year. They are hoping to turn that into a reality show on a streaming service, and they're still working towards that goal, but there are a lot of moving parts to get that done. And so she was gracious enough. We were in Chicago on the road. She came into town to spend some time with her boyfriend, and she was the one who actually said, "I'd love to sit down with you and do a full episode." She said this, basically back when the season started, and so we found a time to do it. This is incredible, and I mean, it really is. This is one of the more raw and emotional podcast chats that I've done with anyone, and I think you're going to find this fascinating. And I don't care who you are, if you're a Simpsons fan, if you're not a Simpsons fan, you're going to relate to this. You're going to get a lot out of this. If you've not subscribed to the podcast, you can do so on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. Be sure to rate us and then follow us on social media. Twitter @TheVoiceBTV, Facebook, facebook.com/TheVoiceBTV, and you can always email me, thevoicebtv@gmail.com. All right, let's get to it. It's episode number 168 with Yeardley Smith, the voice of Lisa Simpson. JW, roll the open.
And so at 14, your body's changing, and I had a really round face. I've lost, obviously, finally, probably only about 10 years ago. I'm 55 now. Lost the weight in my face, but I look back at pictures and I had a really round face. And I just really, really hated my body. And this girl said, well, you could always eat the food and then stick your fingers down your throat and throw it up.